name is Zane.
Well, I guess that's better than being insane.
Hey guys, welcome into the final episode. Well, really enjoyed doing this series, so I'm definitely gonna be doing more in the future at some point. Who knows? But let me know what you guys have thought of it. If you quite like this format, I'll definitely do more. If you made it through to the 7th episode, I appreciate that, guys. That's really cool. This one is a very special nostalgic look back at something that really introduced me to horror as a kid. It was adapted from the series of books by R.L. Stine. We are looking at Series 2, Episode 21 of Goosebumps, The Night of the Living Dummy 3. The story follows the Odell family. Mr. Odell used to run a ventriloquist act. His dummies now lie in the attic, waiting. Interminably waiting. The kid's cousin, Zane, comes to stay for the weekend when strange and eerie things begin to happen around the building and puppets showing up where they shouldn't. Is it them pulling a really elaborate practical joke? Or are the dummies really coming to life? I quite liked the fact that this was directed by a director named Timothy Bond, who also directed some episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the other 2 chapters of the Night of the Living Dummy series. What's particularly interesting about him also having directed the Hitchcock series is that this episode starts with an introduction by the author R.L. Stine himself with his dummy counterpart as well. It's a really cool way to start the episode and finish the episode off as well. And it feels very much like when I was watching this again as an adult, I was thinking this feels like Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And it turns out that was also in the director's filmography, so he obviously quite liked that style of storytelling. The Haunted Mask was definitely the scariest episode of Goosebumps by far. Night of the Living Dummy 3 always had a very special place in my heart, and I think it is because the humour in it was so good and works very well with the spooky atmosphere. So it never particularly scared me as a child, but it was a really good introduction to horror for me. The same as the 2-parter One Day at Horrorland. That's also, I remember that very well as well. This episode in particular was very much, had a huge part to do with me liking spooky storytelling. The suspense building in the opening scene was very much the first thing I remember seeing on screen that was genuinely tense and a bit odd. And a certain scene later in the episode as well, you can almost feel there's going to be a jump scare at some point. By today's standards, it's not very jumpy, but back then you could really, the tension was so palpable. The cast in general are really cool. Even watching it back now, there's certain moments that they just play so well. For example, when Zane first comes to stay with them and they have a photography session, Zane loves to bring his camera and take photos, and they're having a real playful moment all together, and the kids it's one of the only moments where they actually all get on. And there's certain bits like that where the performances really shine and you start to really kind of like care for the characters. There's other moments when the acting's not so great. In particular, probably the worst point is when the kids finally realise the dummies are actually moving by themselves and are alive. The reaction to this is really, really bad. But it gets away with it because it's a good slice of 90s cheese, and for the most part, the acting's pretty on point. We need to talk about Slappy, who is the main antagonist, voiced by Cathal J. Dodd. An extremely freaky character, and definitely will stay with you. Even to this day, it kind of creeps me out thinking a bit about him, particularly because there were different methods used to film Slappy and the dummies in general, particularly Slappy and Rocky. I think when they're most effective in their scariness is when there are close-ups of the dummies and they actually use a puppet, whereas there are some shots where they have to use actors in suits and kind of a prosthetic head. Those scenes are kind of goofy and don't really hold up quite as well now, but you can see that they had to do this. There were certain limitations on set, and they had to be able to use actors for the action sequences. But I think they're still really good in the mannerisms they do, particularly Slappy when he's on his own and kind of scampering around the attic it's still kind of, there's like a real fun vibe. Slappy is malicious. I mean, there's certain points in this where he is just genuinely cruel, and you can tell that he's just aiming to harm people. And that's pretty creepy for like a kids' TV show. A certain scene that really sticks with me to this day, and I think probably the scariest part of the episode. Slappy appears in Trina's bedroom. He coughs up an amphibian. The quip after this is really funny, but also kind of quite disturbing, just how it's performed and what's actually happening. Followed by a really creepy moment with these slimy footprints on the wall that just, your mind just wanders with all the horrible possibilities that could suggest of what this dummy is capable of. The music by Brad McDonald also is so well done. Like, while you're watching it, the music is just really creepy for the most part, and does add a lot to certain camera shots. The theme by Jack Lenz is, of course, iconic. The Goosebumps theme will just always be on repeat in my head, I think. I think that is probably the most memorable theme to a kids' TV show for me personally. So that about wraps up JDizzle Spine Tizzles for now. I really hope you've enjoyed. I'll be really interested to hear if you would like me to do any more kind of reviews along this kind of line, more sort of video-based material. Let me know and I will make a schedule around it. Thank you guys for watching, and have a very happy Halloween. I just swept those stairs.